January, Yugoslavia. A train groans across an icy bridge, and within seconds, there is no bridge. There is black water. There are screams. There is metal sinking. 17 people do not make it out. And a music teacher, drenched, his elbow bleeding, manages to survive. The impossible part is not that he survived. The impossible part is what happens afterward. That would not be his story. It would only be the first chapter. Because Frane Selak would be called the man who cheated death 6, 7 times. But the real question is more uncomfortable. Did he survive the accidents? Or survive becoming a myth? Today, you're going to see the version the internet loves. A bus smashing into a river, a train breaking apart over an abyss, a plane with an open door, cars in flames, a curve that ends in a precipice, and the perfect final beat. The lottery. It sounds almost too perfectly constructed. Was it constructed, or are these real events? The most famous scene, the plane, the door, the void, and the haystack, is also the hardest to verify, the most repeated, the most cinematic. And curiously, the one that leaves the least trace, that is the mechanism. It is not just a lucky man. It is a man telling a story with perfect details, and a world copying it, translating it, and monetizing it without asking permission. To understand why Frane Selak becomes a symbol, you first have to understand the world in which all of this happens. We are not talking about an influencer. We are not talking about a millionaire. We are talking about a music teacher, a normal man in a region where traveling by train, bus, or road was not a luxury. It was routine. And that routine is what makes his story work, because it does not begin with, "I went looking for adventure." It begins with, "I had to get somewhere." And even so, the pattern settles in like an elegant curse. There is always a vehicle, always a failure, always a "this is the end." And in the end, always an "I made it out alive." A bus, a wet road, and a detail that sounds like a joke until you realize it is a sentence. According to the story, the driver had half a liter of rakija in him, a strong traditional Balkan liquor, a steering wheel, a stretch of road, a curve, and suddenly, the bus is no longer on the road. It is falling into the river. People slam into each other. The water comes in as if it had hands, and the metal turns into a cage. Frane gets out, the driver gets out, and you would say, okay, that's insane. But what if that accident does not kill you? And what if that accident turns you into someone? Into the man death can't catch? Into an identity? Because after that, when someone looks at you and says, "You survived," something shifts inside your head. A dangerous idea. Maybe I'm not like everyone else. Maybe I have something. 1962. A train heading south. The Neretva River below, dark, cold, indifferent. And then, the train falls. It does not slide. It does not stop. It falls. The carriage becomes a box filling with water. And there, the little heroic detail appears. I broke the window with my elbow. Not with a tool, not with a hammer, with his elbow. You can imagine the pain, the panic, the raw force of wanting to live. Frane makes it out. In some versions, he even helps an elderly woman. And then comes the blow that splits the story in two. 17 people die. He lives. And this is the kind of survival nobody romanticizes. Because it is not, wow, how lucky. It is, wow, why you? And that is where the myth is born. Because a myth does not need everyone to survive. It only needs one person to survive, so it can feel like a message. 1963, plane, altitude, white noise, and then suddenly, the door, open. Here, the story turns into pure cinema. Frane says the door opened, that he was thrown out, that he fell, and that he landed in a haystack, a plasticina. People talk about 800 meters. They talk about a coma. They talk about a miracle. It is so perfect it feels written by someone who knows exactly which detail will keep the audience from looking away. The haystack. Because the haystack is the universal symbol of this should not save you, but it does. How do you prove that? If it happened exactly like that, there should be traces, an identifiable flight, records, notes, something. But that is where the story begins to behave like legend. The bigger the scene, the less clear the trail. And the worst part, or the best part, is that this does not slow anything down, it accelerates it, because the internet does not feed on proof. It feeds on scenes. Years later, on the road, Frane starts his car, and he smells gasoline. Pause. And the car bursts into flames. Real fire. Biting heat. Smoke closing up your throat. Frane gets out. In some versions, he comes out with singed hair, as if death were now trying a different method. No longer water. Now fire. It is not an isolated accident. It is a series. And every episode comes with its own but. Because the problem with series is that at some point, the audience stops asking what happened and starts asking how true is this? And that question is the invisible antagonist of this story. A road, a curve, and on the other side, the void. In one version, it is said to be 1995, in another, 1996. But the image is the same. A truck, an impact, and Frane's car is headed straight for the precipice. And here comes the detail that changes everything. Frane was not wearing a seatbelt. In any modern handbook, that sounds like recklessness. In the story, it sounds like destiny, because by not wearing a seatbelt, he is thrown clear. And instead of falling into the abyss, he grabs onto a tree. Look at how perverse that is. A decision that would normally kill you. Here, it saves you. The story forces you to listen because it offers a paradox that is impossible to let go of. Was it luck? Or was it a chain of strange decisions that, by chance, worked out? And before you think, that's it, that was the end, the punchline is still coming. The ending that turns a man into a global headline, the lottery. In some versions, it was 2002. In others, 2003. The figure changes too. 6-7 million kuna, or the approximate equivalent in euros. But the idea is the same. The man who does not die now wins. And there, at last, the audience feels that the story closes like a fable, because the brain loves perfect arcs. You survive, you suffer, you endure, and then the universe pays you back. But here is what almost no one tells you, and perhaps the heart of this whole story. Frane Selak was not just a meme. He was also a person who watched his life turn into content, and watched that content become distorted. Years later, he complains about a viral animated short. He says they gave him a mustache. He says they mixed up his accidents. He is saying, in other words, they turned me into a caricature. And that is the kind of pain that never appears in the lucky version, because surviving a train is one thing, but surviving an entire world telling your story wrong, repeating it with altered dates, using it for clicks, and then telling you, shut up, it's just a joke. That is something else. The legend works like this. A charismatic narrator. And Frane was charismatic because his stories are full of sensory details. Drops memorable specifics. Half a liter of rakija. I broke the window with my elbow. I landed in a haystack. The local press picks it up. Then someone translates it. Then someone summarizes it. Then someone copy-pastes it. Then someone turns it into a headline. The man who cheated death 7 times. And that is it. The machine is already spinning. It no longer matters whether it was 1995 or 1996. It no longer matters whether the car accident happened in 1972 or 1973. It no longer matters whether the jackpot was in 2002 or 2003. Because the product is no longer Frane. The product is the idea. And even so, there are parts that do feel more solid. Local interviews with concrete details, places, phrases, sequences, and parts that feel like smoke, the plane above all. Not because it is impossible for someone to survive something strange, but because the more spectacular it is, the more trace it ought to leave. Let me propose a game. We are not going to decide truth or lie as if this were a trial. We are going to follow the staircase of the story the way the audience experiences it. And every time we reach a perfect scene, we are going to ask, what does the myth gain from this? And what does the person lose? Let's go back for a second to the 1962 train. If 17 people really died, if it really fell into the narrative, then that accident is no joke. It is a tragedy. And yet, online, it is told like a second-tier curiosity. That is the myth's first theft. It turns trauma into entertainment. Then the plane. The plane turns Frane into something almost religious. The Virgin Mary was watching over me. People do not hear, I got lucky. They hear, I was chosen. And that idea is incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous. Because once you become a symbol, the symbol no longer belongs to you. Then the fire. The fire is the genre changing. No longer water, no longer a crash. It is Final Destination trying another door. And every time fate fails, the audience gets more hooked because it feels like death is playing with him. Then the precipice. The precipice is the scene that could most easily be filmed today. The curve, the abyss, the tree, and the seatbelt. The seatbelt is the detail that forces you to comment, "What an idiot," or "What a genius." Any reaction works. Any reaction is engagement. That, too, is part of the mechanism. And finally, the lottery. The lottery is the moral ending. The universe rewards him. Even if the numbers do not entirely add up, the audience wants them to add up, because people do not just want a story, they want a lesson. But what if the real lesson were something else? In accounts of his later life, a detail appears that sounds less like a movie and more like real life. He ends up in Petrinja and loses his property in the war. That is where the invincible hero disappears, and an older man appears in a fractured country, with a fame that does not pay the bills, with a story he no longer controls. And then you understand the hidden title of this video. It is not the luckiest man alive. It is the man who got trapped inside his own story. And here is the final dilemma. If you doubt his story, you feel cruel, as if you were taking away the one thing that makes him special. If you believe all of it without asking questions, you participate in the system that turns his life into myth without verification. And if you try to put him back at the center, as a person, you realize that maybe we will never know what percentage is memory, what percentage is exaggeration, and what percentage is the internet rearranging dates so the tale comes out perfect. Frane Selak may have survived several real accidents, and over time, his story became bigger, more polished, more exportable. Not because he was evil, but because that is how memory works when the world is listening to you. That is how the press works when it finds a character. That is how the internet works when it smells a story that shares itself. So the final question is not, how many times did he cheat death? The final question is, how many times did the story cheat him? Because death is an event, but fame is a cage. Or, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, support the channel by subscribing. That way, we can keep bringing you new mysteries. And tell me, is there a specific story you'd like us to tell for you? Sending you a hug.